Well, I think there's a legitimate conversation to be had around the World Health Organization, but this is not a time to be abandoning it. And the world needs a strong World Health Organization, and I think a decision to suspend America's participation in it would be very regrettable. So we need a strong World Health Organization. We can have a conversation about the issues inside it, but this is not a time to abandon it.
But if there are questions about the operation of the World Health Organization, if there are concerns that they are kowtowing to Chinese interests and peddling misinformation, should we be continuing to participate in it, or should this be the time that we look at forming a different World Health body that could be more open, more accurate in how they respond to this pandemic?
No, we should be participating in it, and we should be raising whatever issues we have from inside the organisation. We should not be abandoning the World Health Organisation. That I think is pretty clear. And with everything that's going on at the moment, the idea that we would be walking away from the globe's multilateral response to health issues, I think makes no sense at all. But I really hope that the government, is not going back to politics as normal here. I mean, there's a lot of issues which are facing Australians right now, which are far more significant than Australia's contribution to the World Health Organization. We've got issues around the Ruby Princess. We've got issues around 1 million casuals who are not getting access to job keepers. That's really where the government needs to be focused, and not looking at matters which frankly end up being distractions from the main game here.
Dave Sharma's said that perhaps we could make our funding to the World Health Organization conditional on certain reforms. Would you support that kind of initiative?
Well, there's a conversation that can be had about how the World Health Organization can be reformed, but at the end of the day, we should not be walking away from it, and the world needs a strong organisation, and that means our participation within it.
What do you make of the International Monetary Fund's outlook, saying we're going to have a worse depression than even the Great Depression? This is really historic times for the economy, but they did seem to have some positive things to say about Australia's outlook after the coronavirus pandemic, that we are in a better place than a lot of other countries.
Well, it speaks to the significance of the economic shock which has come as a result of the coronavirus, and it is a huge global economic shock. There's no doubt about that. We get to the other side of this through strong leadership, and it's really important that the government keeps ahead of this situation and is not playing catch-up footy. We've been, working very closely with the government, and we've been, we want the government to succeed, and we're trying to be as constructive as we possibly can around how it puts in place a range of economic measures in terms of its relief package. The JobKeeper allowance, for example, is a really important measure. That was something that we were calling for from day one. The government was not there to start with, but it's a really good thing that the government came around to that measure, because it turns out to be really important in terms of getting us through this in an economic sense. But what's required here is leadership on the part of the government. And I think what I would feel more comfortable about is if what we were getting from the government was an articulated strategy about its way forward, its way on the other side of this, if you like, with an endpoint in mind. And at this point in time, I'm not clearly hearing that strategy, and I think the government needs to articulate it.
And one of the things that the government's reportedly considering is implementing an app like we've seen in Singapore, where it traces people's movements so that they can highlight who has been in contact with someone with coronavirus. This comes at a really high cost to personal freedoms, to civil liberties, to be tracked every moment of the day and night, to be able to go out. Even in a country as compliant as Singapore, they've only had 20% uptake on this app. Do you think this is something the government should be considering?
Well, it would be a big decision. I mean, it's not surprising that the government is thinking about this if they are, because these apps have been used, and used, to be frank, with some success in other parts of the world where this virus is being managed well. But as you said, it comes at a very significant cost in terms of the people's individual liberties. And so this is a conversation that needs to be had with the Australian people. Obviously, with the opposition and the government have not spoken to us about this. If this kind of measure is going to be put in place. But it comes back to this question of articulating a strategy with an endpoint in mind, taking the Australian people into the government's confidence about what its plans are, and making a case. So if it's going to walk down a path as significant as this, then it can't be a simple matter of giving kind of a half drop to a couple of newspapers and having it reported in that way. The government's actually got to do things a bit differently and be upfront with what it's thinking about and how it intends to use it and what its plans are, and bring the Australian people into its confidence and make a case. And as I say, we haven't been approached by the government about this. It's very difficult to articulate a formed view on it in the absence of that. But it speaks again to the fact that the government needs to be on the front foot in terms of its strategies and in bringing the Australian people into its confidence about those strategies.